Put it down. Drop it!
Relax. You're late.
Need some credentials.
Yeah, sure. Take my whole wallet. Hey, look, just do me a favor. Take a look outside. Look, my partner's walking him to the car as we speak.
Your wallet.
You hang on to it for a minute. I trust you.
Oh, God damn it!
Frank Abagnale Jr. was born into a very happy family where his parents loved each other deeply, and one day his father, Frank Abagnale Sr., took him to a store to buy a suit. But the woman there said the shop was closed, so Frank's father quickly pulled out a necklace and casually asked if it belonged to her, which impressed her so much that she allowed them to shop anyway, showing how skilled Frank's father was at clever tricks. Soon after, he asked young Frank to act like a driver and drive the car, and they reached a bank where the manager came to receive them because Frank's father had suffered a huge loss in business and urgently needed a loan. But due to a mistake by an accountant, his taxes were filed late, which caused serious financial trouble. And despite explaining everything, no bank was willing to help him, leading the government to seize his car, property, and money. Yet even in this hardship, he opened a bank account for Frank, and when Frank asked why he was doing this while being in debt himself, his father told him not to worry because his whole life was still ahead and he needed to live it well. Because of their sudden financial struggle, Frank had to change schools. And on his very first day, a boy mocked him for dressing like a teacher, which made Frank so angry that he actually pretended to be a teacher, walked into the class, told the real teacher
I always sub for Roberto.
and she should come back later, and shockingly she left, after which Frank humiliated that boy in front of everyone, and only after a full week did the school realize a student had been teaching the class, discovering it when Frank was about to take the entire class on a trip, leading the school to call his parents, where his father acted serious in front of the principal, but later laughed about it with Frank. One day, Frank came home and saw another man in his mother's bedroom, a man who worked with his father, and although his mother tried to hide it and even gave him some money to distract him, Frank understood everything. And a few days later, his parents decided to separate, and when a lawyer asked Frank whether he wanted to live with his mother or father, he became deeply heartbroken watching his family fall apart, couldn't bear it anymore, and ran away to another city with very little money but his bank account and checkbook, paying hotels by writing checks rapidly until they started bouncing, and he was thrown out. After which he got the idea that checks could be altered. And since this was an older time with less advanced technology, he used this weakness to start making fake checks with different names and cashing them. And whenever a bank manager refused him, he confidently used the same tricks he had learned from his father, including moves like the necklace trick, which helped him get away with it again and again. But slowly, Frank's schemes started getting noticed, and his checks stopped working at almost every bank. Until one day, he saw a pilot standing outside a hotel and noticed how everyone treated him with great respect, which gave Frank a new idea that instead of small tricks, he could pretend to be a pilot. Not a real one, but a fake pilot, because then people would respect him and his checks would be cashed easily. So he went to the airport pretending to be a reporter and told the officials he was writing an article about pilots and needed some information, through which he learned where pilots get their uniforms. Then he called that place and claimed his uniform was damaged and asked if he could get a new one made. And after using a few clever tricks, he managed to get a proper pilot uniform. And when he was about to pay with a check, the employees said they only needed his pilot ID and he wouldn't have to pay anything because the airline would handle it. And since Frank already had a fake ID, he got the uniform for free. After which he went back to the same banks where no one respected him before. But now the manager himself walked up to him and personally cashed his check. Then Frank learned from a hotel that he could cash not just small, but large amounts too, as long as it was a salary check. So he started creating fake salary checks by taking the airline logo from toy planes and sticking it onto the checks. And when he took those checks to the bank, the manager told him that as a pilot, he could directly cash them at the airport, which Frank loved because at the airport he could cash checks anytime. And when a receptionist there asked if he was flying with them that day, and Frank said yes, she directly took him inside the plane since pilots flew for free. And although Frank was terrified because he wasn't a real pilot, he still acted extremely confident. Then he approached a beautiful flight attendant and used his father's old necklace trick to impress her. And because Frank looked older than his age, no one doubted that he was a real 22 or 23-year-old pilot, and he started enjoying life fully, even flirting with a bank manager to understand the entire system of how checks are issued, processed, and how account numbers are assigned, learning that banks use typewriters to encode checks. So he bought a second-hand typewriter just like that, making his fraud far more professional than before, and slowly he began withdrawing larger and larger amounts through checks, turning his scam into a massive operation, which eventually caught the attention of the FBI, and the case was assigned to an agent named Carl Hanratty. who took his job very seriously. And during this time, Frank met his father, whom he regularly wrote letters to about his life, making his father believe that he had truly become a pilot, filling him with pride. And Frank told him that since the government had taken everything from him, he had bought him a car with his own earnings, the same kind of car driven by James Bond in the movie. But Frank's father said that after the tax scandal, the government was still after him, and if he accepted the car, they would eventually seize that too. His store had already shut down and he was barely surviving. And even when Frank offered him money, he refused, saying he couldn't take it from his own son, while Frank had now fully understood the country's financial system and started cashing checks from one state in another state, as the FBI closely monitored his moves and soon reached the hotel where Frank had last cashed a check, discovering during questioning that Frank was still staying there and had been there so long that everyone knew him. So Carl Hanratty went straight to Frank's room with a gun, and Frank realized that without a trick, he would be caught. So he calmly claimed he was from the Secret Service and said the entire government was after this con man, not just Carl alone. When Carl demanded ID, Frank told him to keep the entire wallet and check it himself, and as Carl struggled to open it with one hand, Frank pointed outside, saying their men had already caught the fraudster, where a neighbor was helping a blind man into a car, making Carl believe the con man had been captured, which earned Frank his trust, allowing him to collect all his fake check equipment and tell Carl he would take the evidence downstairs before the police arrived. And now, fully trusting him, Carl even returned the wallet, but Frank deliberately told him to keep it and escaped with all his tools. And when Carl finally opened the wallet later, it was empty, realizing the master con had escaped right in front of him, humiliating Carl deeply and earning him a harsh scolding from his boss, which made Carl so furious that he talked back. Meanwhile, airlines slowly started realizing Frank was pretending to be a pilot, making that scam harder to continue. And when the press learned about it, they nicknamed Frank James Bond, which thrilled him so much that he began dressing like Bond and even bought similar cars. As time passed, Christmas arrived, and Carl sat alone in his office when Frank called to apologize for everything he had done and even gave his address, but Carl assumed it was another trap and said that despite all his money, Frank was terribly lonely, which hurt Frank deeply and made him hang up, even though this time he was telling the truth and had shared his real address. And Carl remembered that the last time they spoke, Frank had used the name Barry Allen, a comic book character, which made Carl realize this was just a kid who looked older than his age, explaining why they couldn't find him. So he ordered a list of runaway children, and after thorough investigation, finally reached Frank's home, where he met Frank's mother. When Frank's mother was shown the photograph, she confirmed that yes, this was her son, and Carl Hanratty told her that her son was a top-level con artist and that she should inform the police if she learned anything about him. But Frank's mother replied that he was just a child who must have taken some money only to eat and survive, saying she would pay it back and asking how much it was, to which Carl replied,
So far, it's about $1.3 million.
leaving her completely shocked. Meanwhile, Frank had moved to another city and was living a very good life. And one day he went to a hospital for some work where he saw a nurse named Brenda crying because a doctor had scolded her. So Frank comforted her and said she was amazing and that the doctor was crazy. And at that moment, Frank got a new idea, asking Brenda if there were any job vacancies there because pretending to be a pilot had become risky. And now he decided to become a doctor. So he created a fake Harvard degree and went for the interview, where the doctors felt surprised that someone like him would want to work in a small hospital. And Frank replied that instead of big cities, he wanted to help people in small towns, which immediately got him the job, though he didn't really do much work and mostly gave useless advice to other doctors, while during his free time he and Brenda grew very close, until one day, Frank was suddenly called for an emergency where a small child was badly injured. And seeing the blood, Frank froze inside but still acted confident, telling the real doctor that whatever he suggested was correct and that he trusted him to do it while he stepped out and would return to check later, though in reality, he was terrified. On the other side, Carl met Frank's father and revealed all of Frank's crimes, but his father said he didn't know where Frank was, and even if he did, he wouldn't tell him, making Carl realize that father and son were very close and that Frank must be sending letters. So Carl analyzed the letters lying there to figure out Frank's location and prepared to go there with the police while Frank and Brenda had fallen in love. And one day, Brenda broke down and told Frank that she once had an abortion, and because of that, her father threw her out of the house. So Frank thoughtfully asked if her father would accept her if he spoke to him about marriage, which made Brenda very happy. And Frank went to meet her father, who was a lawyer. So Frank claimed that he too was once a lawyer before becoming a doctor, using knowledge from courtroom movies to impress him. And when Brenda's father asked honestly what a man like him saw in his daughter, Frank replied that he was just an ordinary man who truly loved her, which deeply impressed him. And when Frank asked what he would need to do to practice law there, Brenda's father said that since he had already been to law school, he only needed to pass one exam, which Frank actually studied for and passed, becoming a real lawyer at last, after which to show Frank blending perfectly with Brenda Strong's family and getting very close to marrying her, as he tells his father that he wants to get everything back that the government took from them and reunite the family just like before, but his father breaks the truth that Frank's mother has remarried, which deeply hurts Frank, and his father also reveals that he already knows about all of Frank's crimes, shocking him so badly that he leaves immediately. Later that night, Frank calls Carl and says he is about to get married and wants to forget everything that happened between them, hoping all charges against him will be dropped. But Carl firmly says he will never stop chasing him as long as he has his job. Then Carl gets an idea and realizes that after marriage, Frank cannot change his name, so he orders a search everywhere under the name Frank used while pretending to be a doctor, knowing that wedding invitations must have been printed somewhere. And when Frank's wedding finally happens, all the agents arrive there, forcing Frank to rush Brenda to a room where he finally tells her the complete truth that he has been conning people all his life, but genuinely loves her, saying he is running away now, and asks her to meet him at the airport without telling anyone where she is going. But the next day at the airport, Brenda does arrive, not alone but with the agent, making Frank's escape almost impossible, until he comes up with another clever plan by going to a college and pretending his airline is hiring flight attendants, selecting many beautiful girls and surrounding himself with them while wearing his pilot uniform to walk through the airport unnoticed as the police get distracted. And at the same time, a boy who looks like Frank stands outside the airport with a car, drawing all the FBI agents toward him, and when caught, the boy admits he was paid to stand there, allowing Frank to smartly escape the country, after which he commits major frauds across several countries until his last known location is found, where he is printing checks. And Carl begs his seniors to let him go get Frank himself, but they refuse. So Carl digs deeper and learns that Frank is now printing checks, figures out that Frank is in Russia, remembers that Frank's mother came from a small Russian village with a printing press, and on Christmas Eve, Carl finally finds Frank there, where Frank casually invites him to walk around, but Carl warns him not to run or the local police will kill him, and then tells Frank that if he surrenders now, he can still save him. Frank asked Carl to swear on his children that he was telling the truth, and Carl did swear and said he truly meant it. After which Frank finally put on the handcuffs, but when they stepped outside, there was no one there, and for a moment Frank thought he had gone crazy. But the very next second, multiple police cars arrived, and the story cuts back to the present, where Carl and Frank were about to land in America, when Frank said he wanted to speak to his father, and Carl, with a heavy heart, told him that his father had died after slipping in the bathroom, which completely broke Frank, and he ran into the airplane restroom crying loudly. And even though the plane was about to land, when Frank didn't come out, Carl broke the door and realized Frank had unscrewed the sink and crawled into the internal space of the plane. And the moment the landing gear opened, Frank escaped, and that same night went to see his mother, only to find that she had settled happily with her new family and even had a small daughter. And just as Carl had predicted Frank would come there, he arrested him. And since Frank was under 19, Carl wanted him treated as a minor, but the government wanted the harshest punishment for such a massive fraud, sentencing him to 10 years of isolation in prison, where he couldn't even talk to anyone, until one day Carl came to meet him because someone else was committing similar check fraud, and when Frank saw the check, he immediately pointed out the mistake, making Carl realize that only Frank could help stop crimes like this. So next time, Carl brought FBI agents with him, who were impressed by Frank's skills, and slowly Carl managed to get Frank out of prison and gave him a job at the FBI with an 8-hour workday, giving him a second chance at life with a warning that if he tried to escape, he would face 50 years in prison. And although Frank tried to work honestly, he soon got bored, even deleting his own records from FBI files and planning to escape to another country on the weekend. But Carl stopped him and told him that he was still a kid. Life had given him another chance, and if he ran, he would lose everything, saying he wouldn't stop him but reminding him to come back to work on Monday and that no one was chasing him anymore. And Frank left, while Carl anxiously waited on Monday, thinking Frank had run again. But Frank returned, started solving cases brilliantly, and eventually found a woman to marry, and finally began living a better and honest life.